Welcome to another episode of Frankly Speaking Sports on all our NGSC sports networks and on Tobacco Road Sports Radio networks, as well as all social media platforms. You know, it's only been about a week ago where Pete Rose was reinstated into Major League Baseball. A lot of different opinions, a lot of different concerns, a lot of people asking questions whether they waited too long, should they have done it before he passed away, and so on and so on. And just about a week ago, it was also when the Cincinnati Reds recognized Pete Rose at their new stadium, and it was just an unbelievable atmosphere there. Obviously, Pete being from Cincinnati, and it is a great honor, thrill, and pleasure to have on our show today a guy who's been on our show before. We love having him, and he was a former teammate of Pete Rose from 1969 to 1975. Let's welcome in Darrel Chaney as we bring him up here. There you are. Darrel, how you doing today?
I'm doing fine. Thanks for having me.
Thanks for doing this. I know we've been trying to do this for a couple of days now, but with some unfortunate inconveniences here, it was impossible to do. But I want to go ahead and start. I know 1969, you and Pete became teammates with the Cincinnati Reds. I believe you played together for 6 years. When you initially started with the Cincinnati Reds, what was your first impression of Pete Rose?
Uh, Probably the same as the last impression that I had of him before he died. Just a guy that wanted to win baseball games. I mean, he went at it the right way, worked hard, real hard, and set the tone for everybody else on the team. Um, that was on the field, but I got to tell you, off the field, I can remember my first spring training. I was 18 years old, just out of high school, was number 2 pick, and I go to spring training. And first night there, Pete asked me, because Pete was always taking the younger guys around his arm and trying to show them the ropes and all that kind of stuff. And he says, "What are you doing tonight, Norton?" And they called me Norton because everybody thought I looked like Art Carney and the Honeymooners. So he says, "Norton, what are you doing tonight?" And I said, "I'm going back to the hotel, Pete, and get some cookies and milk, go to bed." And because back in those days, you didn't get your expense money until you were in spring training for 2 weeks. And I didn't have any. I had $12 in my wallet. And Pete said, "Well, you're not going back to the hotel tonight." And I said, "I'm not. Where am I going?" He says, "You're coming with me to the dog track." So he and Don Zimmer and a friend of Pete's that all I knew his name was Cuban, the Cuban. And we went to the dog track that night. Now, I didn't know that back then if Pete's problems were bad with gambling or just casual better back then. I don't know. I didn't know. It didn't matter to me. Here I am, man. I'm getting to go to the dog track, and I don't even know if I was legal to go to the dog track. I was just turned 19. So anyway, that off the field, he put his arms around me right away and wanted to socialize with me. And on the field, there wasn't one guy when you watched him, whatever he was doing, taking ground balls, fly balls, hitting the batting cages. He was going all out, and he led the players he played with that way as well.
Yeah, you won three National League pennants together. You won a World Series together. During the games, actually sitting, either in wherever you sat, obviously in the dugout, what was some of the fondest memories that you remember watching Pete Rose on the field when you were a teammate of his?
Well, I wasn't there towards the end of his career when he started breaking everybody's records. But I knew they were going to happen, and then and we actually played. And one of the best memories I have was you mentioned 3 playoffs. We actually played in 4 when they formed divisions back in 1973. We got in another playoffs with the Mets. We lost that, and the Mets went on to play the A's that year in the World Series. And I can remember, and it was so hard that series to see the ball being pitched by Seaver, Matlack, Kuzman, Andrews, I think, was in the rotation. Anyway, and Pete was always leading off. The games were at 4:00. You couldn't see because the sun was in the background and the shades were there. And those guys they were such good pitchers. They didn't need that kind of help. But I can remember going into those playoffs. We were in New York playing a game, and Pete went and took he played like he always does. He took a hard slide into second base and upset Buddy Harrelson a little bit. And
that's right.
Buddy didn't take kindly to it. And Pete, I'll tell you what, I remember, Pete was he's very strong. I mean, and he had four arms like Popeye. And he could have demolished Buddy if he wanted to, but there's a couple shots at him, looking like they were going to really get at it. But I was playing that series, and I just remember Pete trying to be kind, if you will, to Buddy, but he had to address the situation. But Pete could have taken him out pretty good, I think. So. Anyway, and back then you didn't get out of games for stuff like that. So I remember that about him. But, there's so many memories. One of them, another one was when we got to the World Series in '75. Pete called a meeting, and he said, "You know what?" He says, "Let's change our direction on this thing and change our goals. Let's win one of these things." But we had been in the '70s, '72, and then we in playoffs in '73, and and we kind of did that, in '75. We kind of made our adjustment, although it was a 7-game series, probably one of the greatest World Series that was ever played. He just led. He led by example. He led by vocalizing things to other players and opposing players as well. So, hey, he was one of the greatest that ever played the game. One of the greatest that ever played the game. And
no doubt about it.
Yeah.
So what was your initial response when you heard, I believe it was 1989, that Pete Rose was given a lifetime ban from baseball?
I was okay with it. And most of us were that had played with him. I didn't know how bad it had gotten for Pete, but I was okay with it because above the clubhouse door of every ballpark you go into, it says no betting on baseball. And so he did that. But I got to tell you, after all these years, and for 15 years, he denied it until he had that book come out. And in the book, he admitted it. And of course, it helped the sales of the book. Might have been a strategic move on his part. But after he came out and admitted it, and then he continued to be, in my opinion, one of the greatest baseball ambassadors that ever lived. Despite what he got in trouble for, he was a baseball man through and through. And his speeches were entertaining, and sometimes they were off color, but he was a joy to be around, and baseball fans loved him, especially in Cincinnati. So after the ban had lasted 25, maybe 30 years, I said, and like a lot of other guys, I said, we gotta be a forgiving society, and I forgive him. Let's put him in before he passes away.
Let me ask you this, Darrel. And on that subject, and the great ambassador that Pete has been for baseball. Pete has talked up baseball, helped promote baseball, anything you can think about in regards to baseball. He lived and died baseball, basically, is what I'm saying. But is it hypocritical when you see baseball? They made so much money off Pete Rose as he got his 3,000 hit, his 4,000 hit, his record-breaking 4,192nd hit, his 44-game hitting streak. And then you see other guys like McGuire and Sosa, who took so much to baseball that year when they did this chase. Is it hypocritical to you that it's okay for baseball to go ahead and make all these millions of dollars off these players, and then when it comes time to recognize these players for the job they done on the field, they do silly things like this?
You're absolutely hypocritical is absolutely the word to use. I can't understand. And back to the Pete Rose ban, I can't understand that. Just 15 years ago they started. They started gambling on the MLB games, and and they had the betting lines on the games, and at the bottom
That's
of the
right.
stadium, it scrolls on there. If you got a gambling problem, call 800 something or other. I can't believe they're selling the game like that, and they're keeping Pete out. That's that's hypocritical. That's hypocritical so far. I don't know. Some of us old school guys, we're not fans of Manfred, and he's held it up for quite a while with Pete, and I don't know. I'm just glad he's going to have an opportunity to get in. Still got to be voted in, and it's
Right.
still got to wait some more time. But it sure made good news headlines, and everybody's making their opinions now. And some of us guys that got to play with him, I got with spring training and all that. I hung around with the guy for 10 years, and I got to play against him a few. I'm just glad it's at least coming. It's just a shame that they waited until he passed away, and that might have been part of the plan too for Major League Baseball, as far as I know.
Yeah, and it's just when I think about it, like you said, and one of the questions I was going to bring you up, it's definitely hypocritical, like you said, when you have these bet MGMs all. Actually, you can walk out of um, the ballpark in Cincinnati, and the first thing you hit is a bet MGM, place where you can go ahead and place bets. I've been to the stadium many times. I've been there a couple times this year. So now baseball, because it's a moneymaker, they're saying it's okay to gamble, but not baseball players. But I mean, in general, like you said, they're promoting it.
We've got a reunion this June of the 75 and 76 back-to-back championships. I think we're going to get a bunch of guys together and go take a couple pictures in front of those signs and stuff like that. Just tongue-in-cheek kind of stuff, I guess. I don't know. But yeah, it's the game is meaning the game's changed so much. It's just crazy, and the money that they make, and having been a player rep when I was with the Reds and the Braves, and having the honor really to sit on some of these negotiation sessions during strike years and lockout years and everything, and be a member of the union fighting for better benefits for us players. I'm glad I had the chance to do what I did back then, not knowing that we'd never make the kind of money guys can make today. But certainly, if it wasn't for what we did back in the early 70s with lockouts and strikes, guys wouldn't be making $352 million over 10 years. It just wouldn't be happening. So baseball's changed so much that some of the younger guys don't know the Pete Rose history. Some of the younger guys don't know the collective bargaining history of baseball either. They don't know. They just think that they stepped into it and got a chance to make millions and millions of dollars. I don't think they understand where it all started, but that's the way it is. And we're still fighting for benefits for players like myself. If I happen to pass away first, my wife only gets half of my pension. When today's players, their wives, and they don't even need a pension. Today's players' wives get everything, get all the full pension.
Yeah.
So
Let me ask you this, Darrel, because I know we're going to run out of time eventually here. Do you think Major League Baseball is going about deciding who gets into the Hall of Fame by allowing the writers to have as much say as they do instead of having former players like yourself have the say in who should go in the Hall of Fame?
well, no, I don't know. I think to begin with, to get in on the first ballot, you got to go through the writers. But then there's other ways to get in. Well, I don't know how many committees there are now that can vote a guy in after years. So it satisfies me that there's still ways for guys to get in that didn't get in elected by the writers. It elongates everything. When a guy gets done playing and he's 5 years from a retired ball player from his playing days, I'd like to see all these committees go to work right away. And if the players, if the writers put their ballots in and they have a July induction, I think they ought to have that, get that over with, and then I think they ought to come right behind it and have these other committees elect guys in and put them in, and maybe after the World Series is over, in the fall or something. So, just a thought, but yeah.
There's too much politics where, and when I say politics, I'm talking about their decision. Shouldn't their decision just be based on what you do on the field? What your results are, what kind of teammate you are, what kind of leader you are on the field, instead of whether you like or you dislike or getting personal about the individual who they're voting on.
See, one of the things that hangs everybody up, and especially the sports writers, in my opinion, is that one of the criteria to get in the Hall of Fame, and I'm still certain it's there, you have to uphold the honesty and integrity of the game of baseball. Well,
Right.
Not only Pete, for a while there, failed at that. Hey, look, there's a lot of guys in the Hall of Fame that have skeletons in their closet, and
Did we lose them?
my great,
There you are.
it is, yeah.
Yeah. Let me also, it was about 8 months ago, Darrel, the sudden death of Pete Rose. I know he was right near me in Nashville, actually, the night before he passed away. When you heard the news that Pete had passed away, I mean, where were you? I mean, obviously you had thoughts and memories that come up. We talked about some of them, but what was your initial, were you in shock? I mean, talk about it.
No, I wasn't in shock because I had seen him a couple weeks prior at a show on YouTube, and I also saw a couple blurbs of him during that Franklin, Tennessee, I believe, is where the show was. And he didn't look good. I mean, he looked like he had really, really lost a lot of weight in the last couple of months. So when you sit there and you see a guy like that who was so big and strong, even though he was in his 80s, you're thinking something's going on because he's lost a lot of weight and all that kind of stuff. So it didn't surprise me when I heard the news. What surprised me was he passed away all by himself. And he had taken the red eye back from Franklin, Tennessee to his home in Vegas. And Pete Jr., I think, was the one that found him the next day because he didn't answer his phone. So, one of my teammates, Doug Flynn, was really closer to Pete than I was all these years almost, and he had told me that Pete had some cancer going on, probably heart issues, he was diabetes and all that stuff that he just wasn't paying any attention to. Pete wasn't. So, man, we lost a great one. You know what I wonder? I wonder when he goes, let's say he gets in, who's going to make his acceptance speech? Is it going to be his son, Pete Jr.? Is it going to be his daughter, Fawn? Is it going to be one of his old teammates? I wonder who, because I know the family's kind of thinking about, we don't want him to go in the Hall of Fame now because you guys waited until he died. That kind of thoughts are going on out there. But I'm sure the family will end up, wanting him in the Hall of Fame. I just want to see. I want to see who makes the acceptance speech for him.
Yeah, I was wondering the same thing if it would be Pete Jr. as well. So about a week ago, Robert Manfred, you hear the news that they reinstated Pete Rose into Major League Baseball. Did you feel like a sense of joy knowing that, even though I honestly believe they should have done it while he was alive, did you at least feel some joy saying, okay, finally they're forgiving him, but they should have forgave him before this?
Yes, sir. I was thrilled to hear the news. Now I know Manfred, Major League Baseball. They knew that they were, because the next day the Reds had that memorial game for Pete.
That's right.
Where, they had more people there than they have opening day for Pete. And so the commissioner timed that because of the next day Pete was going to be celebrated in Cincinnati. And so I think that's one of the things that energized the crowd. I was thrilled. I was thrilled to hear it. And yeah, they should have done it before while he was alive, but they didn't. But now they're going to do something. Sooner or later, they got to put this man in here. What has he got? Still 10 records that are never going to be broken. I mean,
right.
and 4,256 hits. Woo! And I saw a bunch of them, man.
You sure did.
He belongs. He belongs in there. I don't care. You know, who was it? Was it Bob Costas or somebody said even do some asterisk thing saying Pete Rose in the Hall of Fame, asterisk on the plaque, banned from baseball, 1989 or whatever it was. I don't know. Just it's too bad they didn't honor him. And because I can tell you this, if Pete Rose was alive and he was making an acceptance speech at the Hall of Fame, there's only one other one that I thought was really, 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 really good and funny, and that's Bob Uecker.
That's right.
Pete Rose would have entertained the people to no end with his acceptance speech. He would have been funny. He would have been thankful. He would have been all baseball and the love of the game. It's too bad he's not there to do it.
2 more questions. Hey, Darrel, if Pete Rose does get in, will you go there to see the event?
Good Lord willing, and the creeks don't rise, I'd surely like to do it. I mean, you try to get around to some of these guys, and I've got a life to live and places to go and things to do too. Like I wanted to go to Sparky Anderson's induction, I couldn't get away, but I went up to Cincinnati for Dave Bristol's induction in the Cincinnati Reds Hall of Fame, and a couple other guys and so forth. So. Yeah, I'll give it a shot. My idol when I was growing up was Ernie Banks, and I was going to go to Chicago for his funeral, but because I'm from near Chicago, northwestern Indiana, and man, you couldn't have gotten near. I couldn't have gotten near the funeral, the casket, nothing. But I watched every bit of it on the Major League Baseball channel. Thank God we got that. If I can't make it, I can watch it on the Major League channel.
All right, Darrel, before I let you go, is it safe to say that today, if everybody played the game the way Pete Rose played it, that it would be a much better game?
No doubt. No doubt. How many guys know how to bunt today? You hardly see a bunt anymore. The Braves are playing a little small ball now, but Pete could do it all. And go back to the question again, because there's one more point I want to make. What was your question again?
If everybody played the game the way Pete Rose played it when he was playing, wouldn't it be a much better game?
Be a much better game, much more entertaining, much more second guessing to go on. If I was starting a Major League franchise today and I had the free reign of my first 25 players who I wanted to pick, I'd get me 25 Pete Roses. 25 guys like Pete Rose who in their heart knew how to play the game and wanted to win. I don't care how much talent they got, but if they had what Pete had in his chest, I'll give me 25 guys like that, and I'll win you a world championship my first year.
No doubt about it. I agree with you 100%. Well, Darrel, I want to thank you so very, very much for taking time out of your schedule to join us on Frankly Speaking Sports. It's been a pleasure. And once again, I thank you from the bottom of my heart.
I appreciate the time. Thanks for thinking of me.
All right, my friend, stay safe.
You betcha.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that was Darrel Chaney talking about his former teammate, Pete Rose, being reinstated to Major League Baseball. To you all, have a good night, and we'll see you next time.